Hello, and welcome to Founder Friday, where we sit down with founders who are currently taking part in the RevTech Labs, Fintech, and Insurtech Accelerator program. My name is Ashley Everett, and I am the program director here at RevTech Labs. And joining me today is Lennox McNeary, the founder of ArchiveCore. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lennox.
Thanks for having me here, Ashley.
Of course. So just to kind of start us off, can you tell me a little bit about ArchiveCore and what it is that you're currently working on?
Sure. So my partner, Keel Coleman, and I are both physicians, and we started ArchiveCore because we were really frustrated with the inefficiencies in healthcare credentialing. Most people who don't live in the space don't really know much about credentialing, but basically every physician has to undergo this really extensive background check process, and that's called credentialing. So even in a really efficient hospital system, this process takes about 120 days. And it's crucial for patient safety. If you think about Dr. Death, that, most people are familiar with that podcast. That's an example of what happens when credentialing goes wrong. So it's really, really important, but it's also really inefficient. So imagine that you've signed a contract for a new job and it's out of state, and they've given you a start date that's about 4 months down the road. At some point during the next 4 months, you're going to have to move so that you can be ready to start your job on the projected start date. So you make this leap of faith and you relocate to the new city before you've really completed your credentialing process. So on the day before you're supposed to start, you find out that your credentialing has fallen through and you don't have a job, and you've just moved, you've given up your old job, you've sold your house, you've bought a new house, your whole family's relocated. It is devastating for the physician involved. It's devastating for everybody who's waiting for that new physician to come join them, because they're already working short-staffed most of the time and are exhausted. Patients lose access to care. They had appointments set up for this doctor and suddenly they don't. And hospitals lose a lot of money. It's about $7,000 to $10,000 per day when something like this happens. So it's a real problem. Yeah. And Keel and I were really interested in trying to fix it and didn't quite know how. As physicians, that was not something we were really trained in. But over the last couple of years, we have actually developed a process that improves the credentialing workflow so that healthcare professionals can start seeing patients faster. And so right now, that's really what we're working on doing, is getting that into large hospital systems.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible problem to be solving. So kind of going off of that, are there other people that are trying to solve the problem as well? Do you have competitors? And if so, what makes ArchiveCore different?
That's a great question. And when we first thought about this back in 2017, there really wasn't anybody tackling this, or very few people who were really tackling it, partly because it is so complex and there are so many stakeholders. And even in a large healthcare system, each hospital within that healthcare system has their own way of doing things. So you might fill out credentialing paperwork at 5 different hospitals, and every one of them has different forms to fill out, all the same information, but just different forms that they require. So people didn't really know how to start tackling it, and there wasn't much energy or interest in tackling it. Yeah. But over the last couple of years, we've definitely seen some new technology emerge, things like artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, which is what we use, that really are well suited to helping solve this problem. And so with the changes in technology and the concern for healthcare costs, that's really driven efficiency and interest in efficiency. Honestly, our biggest competitor, though, is the status quo. The people who are in the roles around credentialing are people who are risk averse. By definition, you want somebody who has great attention to detail and is going to do everything exactly by the book. And they have processes that have worked for the most part. They're not the most efficient, but they work. And so trying to get hospitals to understand why this new process is safer and better than what we currently have, why they should trust it, has really been a bit of a challenge for us, and I think our competitors as well. A couple of our competitors are looking at more of the ongoing credentialing. So once you're out in practice, they still want to make sure you know your stuff and nothing bad has happened since they first hired you. So usually about every 2 years, we have to go through this process again. Where we focus is really on that initial credentialing. So I explain to people, it's like building your FICO score. When you're in training, you start putting all of these procedures you're doing. So maybe you've done appendectomies or inserted central lines or ultrasounds, whatever it is. You have to keep track of these procedures. And so everybody is keeping track and adding those onto their score over time. And we're taking that training record, that training credentialing packet, and helping people, especially when they get their first job, get that information through quicker.
Wow, that's great. And you said something that I think I hear so often with technology startups, and that's, you're going up against the status quo. You're trying to break into healthcare, and they don't want to change their system and their processes. How do you go up against that? What are some of the things that you try and talk to some of these folks about, and why this change needs to happen? How do you work your way through that, I guess?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about the past year or so is with COVID, hospitals are really focusing more on innovation and innovating much faster than they usually do. And it was interesting last March to see how we had all been asking for telemedicine for so long. And it was, nah, we can't do it, we can't do it. And then all of a sudden, boom, here's your telemedicine access. And now we're all comfortable with it a year later when we thought we would never adopt it. And when you look at the process for sterilizing masks, how quickly hospital systems came up with a way to reuse masks that we would have been scolded if we reused them 2 weeks earlier, and suddenly that was the thing we had to do. So there's this new innovation drive in a lot of hospital systems. And I think COVID has helped push that, as has the need to preserve money. And so looking at innovation hospitals or hospitals with strong innovation programs has really been key for us. Our initial partner has a strong innovation program, and we're really trying to approach hospitals through innovation because this is new and different, and those hospitals are more willing to accept new technology. So that's the main way we've been tackling it. But what's been interesting to me, when we've tested our product, our end users, we thought they would be resistant, and instead they actually love it because they do realize that it makes their job easier. And I think part of that may be because Keel and our physicians, and we're used to using electronic medical records that require 8,000 clicks to get one action completed. And so we've really been diligent about trying to make sure this fit with the original workflow that people had, but just made it better and easier. So they're finding it removes steps instead of adding steps, which I think happens with a lot of software programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's a good segue into my next question. In what traction have you had since your initial launch a few years ago?
So the interesting thing about credentialing is because we're working at the graduate medical education, so when newly minted doctors are let out into the world, that typically happens once a year, end of June, beginning of July. Sometimes people are off cycle if they've had a kid or something else has happened to them, but for the most part, there's this whole batch of new doctors who come on the scene every year in July. And because of that, we can really do our pilots once a year. So we did a pilot with our partner hospital the end of last summer, and we found that we took a process that typically takes them about 10 to 12 hours over 2 weeks, and they were able to do that in just under a minute. So that was really, really exciting for us. We are now working on a more expanded pilot this year with that same hospital system. And then we're talking with some other hospitals as well about our expanded pilot. So we're eager by the end of this new graduation season to have multiple pilots in multiple hospital systems.
Wow, that is so impressive. So to kind of shift gears and talk about ArchiveCore's involvement in the RevTech Labs Accelerator a little bit, what is it about the Accelerator program that drew you in, and what are you hoping to get out of it?
Okay. That's a good question. And for me, a very fun one. We ended up participating in another accelerator, Lighthouse Labs, up in Richmond in the fall. And I was so grateful for that education, especially looking back on where I was when I started. Somebody asked me for our one pager during our mentor, they call it Mentor Madness, during Mentor Madness. And I said, sure, I'll get that to you. And then promptly Googled what goes in a one pager. I was starting at the point where I didn't know what a one pager was. I had no idea what unit economics were. I'd heard of the sales funnel, but had no idea what to do with one. So during that 12-week process and the several months after that, I just realized how much our business had grown and how much I had learned and grown. And I really wanted the opportunity to do that again. And I thought an accelerator was the best way to get our business to grow quickly. I'm a Charlotte native, and so that was my initial interest in RevTech. But when I started looking at the breadth of the mentor network, I initially thought it was going to be Charlotte area, which would have been great for us. But then I saw that how far reaching you guys are. And I thought this would be an incredible experience. And I have been even more impressed once I've gotten into the program to see our mentor network and how accessible everybody is and the breadth of experience they have and the breadth of reach that they all have. And it's just been an even better experience than I was expecting. And I think the other thing I love about RevTech, which I didn't necessarily know going in, is the fact that we get to pick our own OKRs for that 12-week period. And so each company gets to focus on what is most important to them. And we get to spend our energy really, really laser focused on a couple of objectives instead of doing things that are necessary, but maybe not where we need to be pushing at that very moment. So that was a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you're getting a lot of momentum going from Lighthouse to RevTech Labs. And I know our program is 12 weeks and it'll be a fast and a furious 12 weeks. So let's fast forward a little bit. And where do you expect or hope ArchiveCore to be in a year from now, at least?
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
Yeah.
You know, by the end of summer, I'm really hoping that we have significant traction with multiple hospital systems and are actually revenue generating at that point. Sorry, my dog is protecting me.
It's our new coworkers, right?
Exactly. He likes to participate in calls. Buddy, it's okay. So by this time next year, man, I would love to have 6 to 8 hospital systems on board and ready to go in to the next year, and to be expanding into more regions. And sorry, he's in protective
mode. I think he strongly agrees. He's just, yes, that's where we're going to be.
Yeah, so that I think really being on board in a bunch of hospital systems and continuing to grow and improve our product. I think that's what's really important to me, is getting feedback from our customers and making it something that they're excited to use. And I'm curious to see where we are, but excited about where we are next year.
Yeah, no, I know in COVID time, a year is actually 20. So it's a hard time to predict, but I am definitely very interested in watching ArchiveCore grow, not just over the next 12 weeks, but absolutely where you guys go next. I think what you're working on is so incredible and that has such a great momentum. It's going to be a really great thing to watch.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yes. Well, thank you, Lennox, for joining us today and sharing your story and telling us a little bit more about your company.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. And then everyone, I'm going to be sharing all of ArchiveCore's information in the show notes below, so you know where to find Lennox and ArchiveCore, learn more, get connected. And then, of course, everyone, please like and follow our YouTube channel so that you can stay updated with all of our other founders taking part in our program. And until next week, stay safe and stay healthy.